It's a task that you don't want to do often. It seems big, or it just seems like it's not going to be fun to do, and so you put it off.
Rather than, spending a couple of minutes a day on doing it on a regular basis, I'd rather leave it until the very last moment, and every single week as I procrastinate, the stress level goes up and up, and you know that there's so much more to do right now. So what do? You procrastinate some more. So initially, what we want to do, we want to address what we want to talk about today. And today we want to talk about procrastination, something that both you and me are guilty of, and something that we know that many people that we know are guilty of too. Many of us don't really know how we can address that issue and what is a root cause of the problem. So first of all, how do we define procrastination? Procrastination is an act of delaying important things or leaving it until the very last moment, or oftentimes, past the deadlines. For quite a while, we've been talking about your fitness journey or lack thereof. You are highly motivated. You already have, put some plans into place to help you to do it, but only for about a week now, you've been able to start putting some practical tactics into your life and start exercising on a regular basis.
I think I'm not highly motivated. I think that's the problem. Why am I not highly motivated? Because the model that we set up with procrastination, where sometimes you have this deadline, and as it gets closer, the stress builds up, but it's a task that you don't want to do often. It seems big, or it just seems like it's not going to be fun to do, and so you put it off and you do something else, and all of a sudden, all these other jobs pop up. It's like, oh, look at those dishes they need done and all these different things. Or worst case scenario, you can do something completely different. You can say, I just want to relax. I don't want to think about that. And so you do something that's really going to be piling more stress on you, like go and have a drink or do something else, which is just you want to distract yourself and not think about that thing, but it's actually making the problem even bigger. And so, yeah, I think at the moment I don't have a deadline with fitness. There's no pressure. There's not going to be a point where it's like, I'm going to have some sort of competitive match. Like, just say, for instance, I was going to have a boxing match and it's on this date, it's at this time, I need to be this weight so there's like an extreme pressure where it's going to be succeed or fail. I have no succeed or fail point. And so in some ways, it's a different relationship with the procrastination. It's more, there's just a lack of motivation. It's not imminent. And so because it's not imminent, I do bits and pieces, but it's not pushing me hard enough to make me want to get up in the morning really early and really put some strong habits into place, which will get me to that goal, to that point, because there is no point at the moment. It's not imminent.
Yeah, but let me give you some examples of the stuff that I regularly procrastinate on. So especially in terms of work, I've got these notes that after visiting each client, I have to write down notes. And as much as I love helping people and doing things for them, at the end of the day, I come home and I know that what I should be doing, I should be, writing notes from every single visit, because that way it's going to make my life easier. But even though I know this on a conscious level, I come home and I get to the point that I'm just thinking to myself, yes, but it's going to be so exhausting. And then suddenly all these things are popping into my mind. I remind myself, there's this gas and electricity contract that is due for renewal. I'm going to need to tidy up the kitchen because look how messy it is. And, there are so many other things that, suddenly popping up into your mind. Your mind is really, really creative at coming up with all these reasons as to why you shouldn't do this. So there's this, like a second you sitting in your mind. Like there's a captain, which is your conscious self, and there's this evil twin, I would say, that's giving you all these horrible ideas that on the face of it seems really, really good, because all he's telling you is how to cope with the situation. So the situation is causing a lot of emotional stress. So how do you alleviate that stress? Well, come on, you can entertain yourself. You can watch YouTube for some time. And, on the face of it, you could say that, okay, when I'm going to tidy up, I'm going to be doing something productive too. But the reality is that, if you're still on the clock, let's say it's 4 p.m., so you still got this extra hour, you could dedicate that hour on doing that one thing. But instead, you'd rather do something else that's completely irrelevant.
So by your definition of procrastination, it sounds to be a different thing that you're explaining.
Okay,
I don't think I don't think that's procrastination in the same way.
Maybe we have to define procrastination.
Well, you did. I thought it was a good definition. I liked your definition.
But I think that what I do, the examples that I gave, you want to start exercising, but you procrastinate. You give yourself excuses. Yes, you could say that technically speaking, you don't have a deadline, so it's not the same thing.
It's not the same concept.
But I don't really have a deadline to do these notes either. I
No,
just
you
have
do.
I have to have them ready. So
Some
what I would
things-
normally
yeah.
do, I would wait sometimes a month. And then I have, I've got super high level of stress, on my mind. And I have to start writing these notes. And it takes forever to write them down.
When do you do it though? Because I used to do exactly the same thing. And I did it
Yes.
at the end of the month when I had to do it.
Yes.
So there is a deadline. That's the deadline.
Yes,
but I don't
but
have that
no.
with fitness, and
See,
you don't have that with the diet.
Yes and no. I would say yes. And the deadline is that there's a mileage that we have to claim. And so unless you have your diligent notes, there's no way you can claim your mileage. So I still do my notes, on the go when I'm with the clients, and I record myself to make it easier. But rather than, spending a couple of minutes a day on doing it on a regular basis, I'd rather leave it until the very last moment, and every single week as I procrastinate, the stress level goes up and up, and you know that there's so much more to do right now. So what do? You procrastinate some more because you know that the problem is already really, really big. So I'd rather leave it for another week.
Because you can do it. It's a model. It's a model that you've practiced in the past,
It's
and
a
it
habit.
worked. A model or a habit, it's the same thing in this context. You're waiting until the pressure builds up, and you'll do it at the end. Like you can. You've done it numerous times in the past, and so that's the model you follow, and you'll do that until it becomes a problem. Until you fail.
But it is
Maybe.
a problem. It is already a problem, and I hate myself.
Well, do you get them
for doing
done?
This. Ultimately, I do. But it doesn't matter. Every single month is the same story. I would promise myself that I'm never going to do it again.
So why would you?
Diligent.
But why would you not want to? Why do you promise yourself that?
Because I think that my life would be so much better if I didn't have that extra stress on my mind. The stress that's being created because of me procrastinating. And even though, on the conscious level, you understand that what you're doing is wrong, the reality is that it feels like there's another you, this evil twin, that's giving you all these, silly ideas. And I know that ultimately you are the captain of the ship. So you should be able to decide whether or not you're going to listen to that evil voice or not. But the reality is that we are a pleasure-seeking machines. So, and we're trying to avoid stress and things like that. So every single time you come home and you're a bit tired, and you know that, let's say, there's something that you really need to do, and there's an alternative, there's something really pleasurable that you can do. And more often than not, many, many people will choose to do this, pleasurable thing, which is absolutely understandable. But the consequences of this type of behavior can be really, really horrible long term, because once you start procrastinating in one area, it has a tendency to spread into the rest of your life. So it's like a muscle. The longer you perpetuate the habit of procrastination, the bigger that muscle becomes. So I think that ultimately what we need to do, we need to discuss what we can do in terms of tackling this problem and how we can change the whole dynamic of, approaching procrastination.
Yeah, well, I think the muscle analogy is good. The interesting thing with the muscle is you don't have one muscle. You've got many different muscles for different tasks and different jobs. And in the same way, you've got many different areas in which you're procrastinating. And I think you're right, though. I think if you generally procrastinate a lot in one area, you're more likely to do it in another area, and you can start doing it right across your life, and then that's just completely disastrous. So, I think what you've got to do is you've got to win the battle in an easier area. So, to establish new habits, you've got to not wait until that time when there's going to be masses of pressure on you, and you're going to be like, you're in the ring and you're in the arena, because you're going to go and you're going to do what you did before. You're going to do what was worked for you before. That's what we do. And so if you want to do something different, you need to have practiced that different thing previously in an easier environment, an environment like a sparring environment where you can practice out a new move, practice out a different way of doing things. And so the way you do that is, you've spoken before about habits in the morning. So getting up and doing something, which is practicing that non-procrastination, doing something productive.
Cleaning up your room, for instance.
Cleaning up your room, yeah.
Maybe we should call it for what it is. It's going to be easier for people to understand, what we're talking about. Because I don't think that anybody will have access, to the previous conversation that we've had, that we forgot to switch on the microphone.
And which is going to be useful for one of our problems of why people procrastinate as well. Because, I think sometimes when you try something and you fail, it's another reason why you kind of think, like if you got to write an essay, and you start writing it, and then you realise I've written it on the completely wrong thing, I'm going to have to start from scratch, then even more in that situation in the past, I'll be like, okay, I'm going to do something pleasurable. I've failed, and it builds on even more pressure, more reason for procrastinating. That's another aspect of what can be a problem, what can cause people to procrastinate.
See, so on one level, you're trying to address the stress level, so you're trying to alleviate it. But on the other hand, what you're doing, you're actually increasing it to an even higher level. And the funny thing is that we understand that. Most of us understand that. But we'll still do that. And why do we do it? It's because that's the way most of us are wired, I guess. And it's because of our prefrontal cortex that we've got this really strong control over our desires. But why do we not exercise that muscle, that often? That's the good question. Because many of people who would procrastinate, if you think about it, are not only people who are not educated, who are not very intelligent. We're talking about, people from all walks of life that procrastinate. Whether you are working, as a cleaner or, in a factory, or whether you are working, in the bank, it doesn't matter. You've mentioned before something that's quite common. Oftentimes, people when they go to the university, rather than pacing themselves, rather than preparing the essays, they're preparing work as they go, they leave it until the very last moment. And what happens then? Ultimately, they manage to create or to come up with some sort of mediocre work that will give them pass. But the reality is that this work would be so much better. And we're not talking about individual cases. We're talking about huge number of people.
I can tell you why. It's two different modes. There's one option, which is survival. Yeah, you just want to survive the thing. You just want to get through there because you're in a state of being. So you are being. So you have this demand, this pressure that comes upon you, and you don't want to fail that, because to fail it really curtails your moving forward. And so you want to survive it, and that's why you've used this method in the past. It's worked for you, and so unless it doesn't work, you're less likely to address it. You're just going to carry on, especially if you're in survival mode and you're just trying to get through, to just try to move through life. You're describing something different. You're describing the alternative, where you're looking at it and you're thinking, well, what do I want? I want to produce good work, and that survival mode, it doesn't produce good work. Doing it at the last minute, it's not good work. So there's one problem. Number two, I don't want to have all this unnecessary stress. And so you're looking to provide a solution to those things. You're looking to step it up and not be in survival mode, but to be in thriving, successful mode. And that's a real challenge. So how do you win that battle? How do you avoid that model, which is so easy to fall into, which is just like, oh, well, leave it to the last minute, wait till the pressure really mounts up and forces you to get the thing done?
I think that all of us, can find something in our past that'll be a really good baseline of what really productive living means. So I think that all of us have experienced something like that, for some period of time, we were able to wake up at the time we said to ourselves that we're going to wake up, that we did what we said that we would be. And when that was happening, we've created that momentum. And the longer you continue this or these positive habits, the stronger the momentum becomes, and the stronger that willpower muscle becomes. So ultimately, we've diagnosed one thing that's very, very crucial. The procrastination is a habit. And once you create that habit, it's really, really difficult to change it, because habit, by definition, it's a behavior that's being automatized to the extent that you don't have to think about it, which is a problem. So what you have to do, you have to start unraveling this negative habit. And how you're going to do it? You're going to have to put some conscious effort into realizing what you're doing at any given time and starting to introducing, some sort of simple habits that you can implement in your life to help you with it. So what I mean here, I don't want to sound vague. So for instance, let's say to yourself that you want to wake up at a certain time any given day, and you stick to it. You have no idea how powerful something like that can be, how much motivation it can give you, and how much stronger you can become by sticking to that simple rule and habit for, let's say, a week, 2, 3 weeks. And once you see that it's working, what you can do, you can add something else, something simple, but something that you can show to yourself that you can repeatedly perform on a daily basis. Like, you wake up in the morning and first thing you do, you tidy up your house.
Well, to keep your momentum, I think that's the fundamental key concept, is keeping your momentum.
Yes.
It's building up momentum and keeping it going. It's not allowing yourself to get to that stressed out position where you're relying on stress to get the job done. It's doing the things you need to do before time, in good time. So procrastination, doing it in bad time. What we want to achieve, whatever word we use for it, is doing things in good time and feeling in control. And so the problem with procrastination is you have no room for error. And sometimes life is unpredictable and it gives you error. And so that's often when you fail. And that's often when procrastination, when people want to do something about it. Because it's like they knew they could get it done within this time limit, but the unexpected happened. Act of God. Lightning, whatever. Somebody phones up, something breaks, you can't find something, and because of this other thing, everything was timed down to the last minute with stress, and because of this other thing, it doesn't work, and you fail. And often that's the point where people are like, this model is not so good. I need to not do this anymore, rely on the procrastination model. I need a new model where I plan ahead of time, and or for the reasons that you want. I want that model because I want to make something of higher quality and because I don't want the stress. And so for whatever reason, whether it's failure or want to do things better, that's why you want to reject the procrastination model and find a new model. And that's usually people's motivation for that. So how do they do? What is that new model? What is the alternative to the procrastination model?
See, one of the important things that you've just mentioned here, sometimes, yes, there's something like act of God, something you can't really do anything about. But there's something that's called a Parkinson's law. So the Parkinson's law basically states that the time will either expand or will shrink to any given task depending on the demand. So what I mean by this, let's say you've got 2 hours, you give yourself 2 hours to tidy up your house. And let's say something happens and you end up only having 1 hour. So even though you said to yourself that you've got 2 hours to do it, now because you only have 1 hour, you'll still manage to do it in 1 hour. Same goes for things like doing, let's say, notes, for instance, for work. If you dedicate yourself a time, let's say 2-3 hours to do the notes, you will do these notes in 2-3 hours. Whereas if a certain demand will be placed upon you, they'll force you to do it in an hour, you will do it in an hour. It's not going to be of the same quality, but you will be able to fit that. So that's one of the things that I just wanted to interject here.
Well, and it opens up a new challenge with creating this model, this alternative to the procrastination model. Like you say, there's a challenge there. It's like if you're going to do this better thing, maybe it's going to take way more time. So if you use the procrastination model, you get it all done in 3 hours. If you use the plan ahead model, maybe that adds up to taking 9 hours. And it's like, do I want to? Because there's so many. It depends on how much demands as well. It's like sometimes you can't do everything well. Sometimes you just need to do it 3 hour. You just need to do the 3 hour version. And I think depending on people's lives, yeah, I think the challenge comes in when you procrastinate on the things that you didn't want to procrastinate on. Maybe some things we need to be use the procrastination model.
Yeah, but I think that the bottom line is it's a habit. It's a habit, and what you want to do, you want to create a better habit of not procrastinating. And the reason why it is so difficult for people is, as I've mentioned before, habits are processes that are really automated. We don't even have to think about it. So when you're trying to introduce a new habit, it takes time, and initially there's this friction. There's, initially it feels like it's going to be so hard. No, I can't do it. And the reality is that you just have to become completely aware of the fact that it's going to get easier. Over time, these new habits of non-procrastination are going to become so automated that you won't even have to think about it. So that's one of the reasons, one of the things that not many people even contemplate on. They just think, oh, it's too hard for me, so I'm not going to do it. But the key is to persevere for not that long. 2-3 weeks, I think, is enough to introduce a new habit. And initially, it's going to be really, really difficult to trim a little, this really bad habit, but you can do it. It's like, for me, I've got into a habit of watching these negative news for quite a while now, and you're getting into this this pattern of feeling completely stressed out, and you say to yourself, no, I want to stop doing it. I want to start, focusing more on productive things. I want to learn new things that are going to make my life better. But there's this procrastination. Oh, yes, I'm going to do it tomorrow. Right now, there is still this couple of extra news that I really need to know. I really need to watch. But reality is, you don't. All they do is just make you feel miserable.